and welcome to Philosophy Fools, a bi-weekly podcast where a young father and old bachelor talk about life, philosophy, and staying curious. After we catch up on what's been stoking our curiosity since our last podcast, Josh and Uncle Greg discussed the top 4 insights triggered by our reading of Seneca's On the Shortness of Life. We'll discuss leisure and why it's important, how we value time, creating your life's purpose, and becoming your own parent. We'll wrap up with Josh's Dad Corner, where he gets an unexpected 2 weeks with the kids, and Uncle Greg's Question of the Week. Hope that sounds good, because that's what we're doing. Okay, we're back. Josh, before we get started this week in our primary topics, let's catch up on what kind of things have been triggering our curiosity, and just anything that might be of interest for the last week or so. Anything happen to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a good couple of weeks since our last talk. So a big thing that I was thinking about this week is another golf story. I love golf, as you know. So, I mean, a big thing that happened this week is that it was supposed to rain all week. Every single day had rain in the forecast in some sense. And I saw something a few weeks ago that I really loved, and it was simple. All it said was, "Don't cancel your plans due to the weather."
Ah.
And I really started to think about that, and I thought about so many instances in my life where, it was too hot outside, or it was raining, or it was supposed to snow or something like that, and I canceled or didn't go through with a plan. And so I just got curious when I heard that statement, because I realized that, how often do you make plans and the rain, it only rains for 5 minutes, or the weather is incorrect, and then the rest of the day is beautiful. And so my father was talking all week. We had a tea time set for Thursday or for Wednesday for his birthday.
Uh-huh.
And on Monday he calls me. He's like, "Josh, it's supposed to rain." And I said, "Well, do we know it's going to rain?" He's like, "It's 50% chance, man. I think we should just cancel it." And I'm like, so from there, I'm like, well, maybe we should just cancel it. We might get rained on. And then, I started to think about it. I was like, why don't we just go out there? It's just rain. What's the really the worst thing that could happen? Mm-hmm. And so we ended up not canceling, which was great. We went to the golf course. Now, we did get rained on for sure. About 9 of the holes, it was pouring rain. Not super, super bad, but it was bad enough where we were all drenched. But we were all sitting there in the cart under a tree with all the rain in the middle of the day, nobody on the golf course, just talking. And it was actually a really enjoyable time.
Yeah.
In the pouring rain. And we ended up getting, 9 out of the 18 holes with no rain. So it was a good day. And that experience that we had in the rain was just it was actually really fun, and we talked a lot, and we got soaking wet, and we still had a really great time. And it actually, in my opinion, might have been better with the rain.
Right.
And so that was just something that really sparked my curiosity, is like don't cancel your plans due to something like the weather or anything like that, or I'm sure you can change that to anything else, but that's what sparked my curiosity.
It's really interesting that, well, first of all, I think that's great that you guys had a great day for your dad's birthday, because that's what it was all about, right? That it was the idea of getting together. The golf was secondary. It was you guys getting together to celebrate that's primary. And I think that was awesome that you guys just pushed through and made that happen, because it sounds like a great day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still got a birdie, and my dad chipped one in. So, we had a good time.
That's great. And, it's funny. It's funny because what you said dovetails almost exactly into what my curiosity driver was this week, which was when I went out yesterday to find a haircut, and I have to go back. I have old man hair. Old man hair is interesting because it's not young man hair. No matter how you cut it, it kind of looks good if you got a good head of hair. Old man hair can look terrible even with a great haircut. And so for the last few weeks, I've been thinking to myself, I really need a haircut, but I've gotten in the habit of getting just what I consider to be horrible haircuts month after month. I was just delighted when the pandemic let us go back in to get a haircut. But every time I'd get one, I'd just for 3 weeks be looking in the mirror like, this hair looks terrible. But I didn't know if it was a haircut or if it was a hair cutter. But it was like learned helplessness, where I was just like, I guess the idea of haircuts just means my hair looks bad for 3 weeks. This all leads up to the idea that there's a barbershop right next to where my new gym is located. And I've known about this barbershop for over, 2 years. And I've just never thought to go in. And yesterday I was like, you know what? Everybody else cuts my hair bad. These guys can't be any worse. And when I got in there, I like, as an old person, to get my hair in a flat top crew cut. And literally none of my other haircutters are willing to try to do it. They've come to some place where they realize that like the downside is so much worse than the upside that they aren't willing to offer the service. And man, I walked into this place yesterday, and this lady came down and just cut me an awesome flat top yesterday. And I was extraordinarily happy with it. But it got me thinking about this idea of like, you just don't know what you don't know. Anytime that much like the weather, if you think to yourself like, well, I know the weather's going to be bad, you don't know anything. You'll only know it when you actually know it. And it reminded me of a few years ago, a friend of mine wanted to go to the museum, and which is only a 10-minute drive from me. He wanted to go to the National Gallery of Art. And I was just like, there's not going to be any parking. There's just no way. It's like, it's impossible to park. And he was looking at me like I was some kind of crazy person, because clearly people park there all the time. That's the reason there's so many cars parked, is that people park their cars. And then it just struck me like, oh my God, this is correct. I'm willing to just stop with the idea of seeing the finest art on the planet, because I'm convinced that I know that there's no parking. And at which point I said, well, let's just go hop in the truck. And I said, well, if you're going to be doing it, you might as well look for the perfect parking spot first, because if there's any parking, that means that you might have the perfect parking spot. And I'll be damned if right to the front door of the museum, there was a parking spot. So just goes to show you, you don't know what you don't know. You're better off trying to do something than you are trying to think about something.
Yeah, it's funny. We have like these little internal blocks that kind of stop us, and like for the parking lot situation, was that from, something that happened to you previously, like where you get that notion that like there's no parking spot or anything like that and you don't find it? So I think that's definitely something that, yeah, you just need to explore and get out there and really find out what's going on. Because even if you hear the weather on the news, or if you see that it's super busy at an amusement park and you don't want to go because there's going to be so many people or anything like that, you don't really know until you go, I guess.
Yeah. And the thing that's crazy is that the thing you're trying to avoid is mild annoyance. And it's just not worth you're trying to create a universe in which everything's going to be perfect, and it's imperfection that makes life fun.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it right now. Like how often have I thought about going on a hike in the middle of the day, like at say like noon or something like that, and I know that hiking parking lot can only fit like 15 cars, and so I just assume at 1 o'clock in the afternoon that on a Saturday that it's gonna be full, where I could just drive by it and check it out, and it might have some spots open. I after thinking about that, I think that happens more often than I realize, and it's something I'm gonna start thinking about even more, for sure.
And the same here. And it's the kind of thing that you really do need to remind yourself always, because we just fall into these habits and they aren't good for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are curiosity killers.
I like that term. Anything else happen over the past couple of weeks for you?
No, that was it for me.
All right, sounds good. So we are going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll discuss some of our favorite ideas from Seneca's On the Shortness of Life.
Okay, we're back. And this week, we're going to be talking about our top 4 ideas that were triggered in us by reading on the shortness of life. Last week, Josh and I did an exit survey on Seneca's On the Shortness of Life, where we chose 10 topics we thought best described the full breadth of what was covered in the essay. This week, we get more personal and discuss the 4 ideas that had the most meaning to us individually. What did Seneca touch on that got our mental engines running? And here it's just an idea, just showing that there are practical things that you pull from reading philosophy, and practical in the sense that they are things that you can use in your day-to-day life. And these are 4 ideas that we found that we thought that we can we'll take with us moving forward, and that we'll internalize in our day-to-day life. So, Josh, why don't you kick us off with your first idea?
Sure, absolutely. So my first idea is an important one to me. So it is involved with leisure. So he talks a lot about leisure and why it's important and why it can also affect you pretty negatively if you're not doing it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this means a lot to me because my whole life, I always think that leisure is what I want, in general. I want to be at leisure. I work right now, or at least I have previously. I work so that I can do things that are considered leisure,
Mm-hmm.
and whether that be going on vacation or sitting at home and watching TV or whatever. But really, like sometimes, not as much now that I'm more aware of it, but I would just think, oh, I need to get through this week and I need to get to Friday so that I can sit on the couch and not think about anything. And that was like a desire for me for a lot of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing he talks about is that the difference between the types of leisure. So a funny thing he says is that there's people, there's a Roman emperor who he says, "Hey, can you put me into my bath?" And so like literally his servants lift him up and put him into his seat or his bath. And then he's like, "Am I even here?" And so, it was just kind of an interesting thing where he's not even realizing, like he's just relaxing, and he's getting put into this relaxing point, and there's no thought to leisure or anything like that. He's just like, let me be a sloth. And when he said that, I started thinking, I was like, so what is leisure, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because like leisure seems so desirable for everybody, and so the biggest thing here is that he talks about leisure being idle preoccupation. And so if you are at leisure, you need to be in control of your leisure. So one example to bring it kind of into my life, and then we've talked about this too, is that it is the choice of leisure.
Uh-huh.
So if you're coming home on a Friday night and you talk to your family and say, we are going to do a movie night, and we set up a movie theater outside and we get popcorn and cookies and we set it up, then that is something that is in my control, and it's a leisure activity, and that's something that would be okay. Now, on the other hand, coming home and sitting in front of Netflix with no plan and going through all, how many of us have sat there on the Netflix screen for an hour looking for a movie, and then, find a movie and watch it for 5 minutes and it doesn't work out, and then watch another one for 5 minutes and it doesn't work out. And then 2 hours is up and you've basically wasted 2 hours, just looking for a movie. Like that would be the biggest example for me in leisure. So what do you think about leisure? I know you have a lot to say about this also. So yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think that it's going along with what you're talking about in terms of being decision based is this idea that just a word, it's a word. Leisure is a word. And I think that, when you read it inside of Seneca, it gets you to that thought of, well, if he's calling it out, that there must be some kind of special meaning to it. And that's something that I think when you talk to 9 out of 10 people and you talk about leisure, they're going to think exactly what you're saying, was I stumble home and I turn off my brain and I zone out. Like, that's leisure. And that's more what I consider to be relaxation. Or just an idle preoccupation, like Seneca says, that there's a real value to this idea of an active non-work state. And that can be anything that I think is creative. Like when you talk about a movie night with your family where you sort of make a big production out of it, that is an activity where just the sheer amount of thought that you're putting into it enriches the experience for everybody who's participating, because they are seeing it as a special thing. And whereas if everybody comes, so if you just stumble in the door at the end of a long day at work and go like, everybody shut up, we're going to watch TV, that becomes an entirely different childhood nightmare as opposed to something fun for the family. And when I think about leisure, I think about things like that, where you make a decision where you say, like, you know what, so much of my week has been taken up by things of my personal responsibilities and things that I may even enjoy. I may enjoy my work, but that doesn't mean that it's the same as something that I would do if I wasn't being paid for it. And so being able to have something, whether it could be gardening, it could be cooking, it could be your home, it could be like putting time and effort into the decoration of your home, because that's a place that enriches your family life. I think that the distinguishing feature in my mind of leisure is that it's enriching, that it's something that it generates energy as opposed to something that saps your energy. And I think we've all had that experience of just staring vacuously into a television screen and being more tired at the end of it than you were at the beginning. And it's because it's not a creative activity. It's a neutral activity at best.
Yeah, it's like I have to kind of redefine in my mind what leisure means. So getting off of work and doing an event that we were just talking about, or if I go and play golf, like golf can be an example of something that is a waste of time, and it can also be an example of something that is good leisure for me. It just depends on my mindset really going into it, and I think that just focusing for me, like at the end of the week, my leisure needs to be something that matters to me, and sometimes that is, that's doing something hard, like doing a 7 mile hike, or working out, or cooking food that involves more than 3 ingredients or something like that, and really enjoying it, even though it's just cooking dinner for my family.
Right.
So it's really redefined, like having concrete definitions of something like leisure is not good for me, and just realizing that it can mean a lot more than just zoning out in front of the TV.
And deeper into where I think that Seneca is driving with all of this is that notion that if your whole life is dictated by thoughts of I'm not doing what I want to do. I can't wait till my working life's over so I could be retired. It's this whole idea that there's no balance in your life, and I think that he introduces the idea of leisure as a balancing activity, as a thing that sort of shows that you have your working life, but you also have your leisure life, and that you should probably put as much energy into both and not let one be the dominant feature, even though something like your work life is probably practically giving you more, in the sense that it's helping protect your family, it's helping protect you, it keeps a roof over your head, it does a lot of very practical things. But that, and that's where, I think when people hear the word balance, they often hear 50-50, and that's really not, I think, the case. I think balance just means not being 100% leaning into one direction. And so that if somebody, like I found a while ago, that reading is something that I really enjoy reading, and it can be anything, it can be philosophy, it can be a detective story, it doesn't really matter. but that I noticed that when I didn't read, that my life felt more cluttered and more sort of like I was more enslaved to my life. But even just 1 hour of reading tended to sort of balance out 8 hours worth of work or however long the day was.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's almost like a meditation for you. It seems like, and it's the same thing for me. Like when I hit golf balls or something like that, it really focuses me and it puts a leisure in my life that is also like kind of like my grounding almost, and it really helps me.
Well, and I think, and just to close off this idea, one of something that's really important for all of us is to have that sense that we do have a leisure that we choose. And it doesn't have to be consistent. Like you could definitely be 6 months worth of golf, and then you can, in the wintertime, transition over to, I don't know, the study of film or something. It's whatever it is that can, but it's not the topic that's important. It's how you tackle the topic, and that there be something there that you have something to look forward to, because you have a lot of, but everybody's got a lot of responsibility in their lives. And even if you can only squeak out 30 minutes of the thing you love, like I love to draw. And if I can get 30 minutes of good drawing in a day, then that really helps to balance out a lot of things where otherwise I might be thinking, oh, I'm slaving my life away. It's that terrible sense that you aren't really a conductor in your life. You're more of a passenger.
Yeah, and like just to close it out again is like hope, like everyone's just hoping for that leisure, like that it's gonna happen. You know, you work really hard and I'm gonna have a time in my life where I'm gonna hit leisure, and that just doesn't happen. And being in control of it and doing it on a daily basis is definitely I think something that's important with leisure.
And I'm actually, as much as I'd like to close that out, I still have to keep talking about that topic, which is you just raised a really interesting point, which is that idea of people wishing for leisure. And you'll notice if you talk to a lot of people, particularly when they say something like that, more often than not, they don't really have an idea of what that is. Like for them, it's the absence of work. It's not an active or real thing to them. It's something where they have an abstract notion of maybe they'll go fishing and maybe they'll go traveling or maybe whatever. But the key word there is maybe. They aren't going in a direction that's very specific. And that's something that I've found in my life because, well, as a bachelor, I don't have any responsibilities. Like I literally have in the last, I was just looking at this the other day. I think in the last 12 years, I've only worked like 6 of those. And that's because I've been able to devote essentially years at a time to leisure and then go back into work. And so that's how I've been able to achieve balance over those times. And in each of those circumstances, it's something like writing a book or doing some art or creating a seminar. These were all things that I did when I was taking these sabbaticals from work. So again, just want to put that out there that if in your mind or in the minds of our listeners, that if they think about leisure and they can't come up with something clear in their minds of what they'd like to do, that's just a good signal that it's a good thing to look for. It's to start thinking about, hey, if I did have leisure, what would that be? Because at least then they can get away from the anxiety of sort of like FOMO, like that they see other people engaging in leisure activities and they go like, oh, I should do that, without it really being a thing that they choose to do.
Yeah, exactly. Be conscious of your own leisure, as Seneca says.
Sweet. Okay. Well, I'm taking over now. So
All right, you go ahead.
My next topic is this idea of that Seneca really harps on in the text, which is the idea of valuing time or wasting time. And the quote that jumped out at me was when he's discussing this idea, he says, both of them fix their eyes on the object of the request for time, neither of them on time itself, just as if what was asked were nothing. What is given is nothing. And they're talking about time, that if somebody asks you to do something, or if you yourself do not take time seriously, you're devaluing it. You're looking at it from a perspective of it being a limitless resource very much like the way people treat the environment, where they say like, well, the air will be there forever until it isn't. And but when it comes to time, it's 100% finite. We don't know how finite, but we absolutely know that there's going to come a time when there's no time left. And so from Seneca's perspective, and this is something for me that I really I want to embrace this and continuously remind myself of this idea that time is valuable. Time is a thing that probably that absolutely has a value greater than any material wealth or any kind of material circumstance, because time is the medium that we can use to create value for ourselves, to create value for others, to engage in leisure, as we were talking about, that everything has a cost, and that cost is the time that you spend doing it.
And now valuing time and wasting time, that can be different for everybody, right? Like, because everyone has different values and everyone has different judgments of what's wasting time and what's being valuable for them, right?
Yes, but it's kind of a paradox, which is everybody's got a ticking clock. And so that's the thing we share in common, is that time is finite and time's running out. And that is a thing that all human creatures have to deal with. They either deal with it by ignoring it and just acting like that time will go on endlessly, and then only in the final minutes of life really have that realization that it's all gone, that all of their opportunities are gone. And but you're right, though, that if one person values building a garden in their backyard, that's different, and the time that it takes to build that garden, that's different from somebody who values like writing a book. Those are two different ways that you spend time, but both of those people are engaged in the reality that time is running out.
Yeah. So, I mean, what would be the actionable thing for people or for me here? I mean, is it like waking up in the morning and being great, like gratefulness? Would that be, a stepping stone here to kind of realize, that time is a lot, like wake up and be like, I'm thankful to be alive, and then really go for the day. I mean, so what would be actionable here?
I the way that I interpret this, and the way that I really internalize this, is that it's about having an intention, that essentially, if your life is without intention, then your use of time by definition is without intention. And so there are lots of things that, particularly in modern life, you and I both have regular job, or who knows, I think I'm going to have a regular job next week. I won't know until it actually begins. But the fact is that when you wake up in the morning, that you already realize that big chunks of your day are already spoken for. And that's fine, because that's a decision you made. You've made a decision that you're going to have to eat breakfast, you're going to go to work, you're going to get your kids ready to go to school. All of these things are macro time consumption things that you've already made a decision about. So all that's left when it comes to this idea of valuing your time is the leftover time. And that leftover time is almost by definition gets wasted if there isn't something that you've already decided to fill that time with, something that you value. And so that can be, it's that fundamental notion of intention that proves that you value your time. Another proof that you don't value your time is that you have no intention to use it for anything in particular, that you'll just let it pass. And it's not unusual. And this is paradoxical, but it's a truth of life. It's kind of like what we were talking about rain, which is you don't really know what's going to happen until it's happening. But if you inside yourself are able to make a mental picture that every minute of time equals $1 or $5, and you were imagining yourself just shelling out that $5 to somebody who's a total stranger to you each time that you waste a minute, or just a half an hour or whatever, but just if it becomes real to you that your time has more value than the money in your life, that you'll tend to use it better than if you imagine it to be endless and an infinite resource.
Yeah, I get from this quote too, you know, valuing other people's times. Like for instance, just us doing this podcast here, like I always have to remind myself, you know, that I'm thankful for this time with you on the podcast and being able to learn and everything. Because I know we both have fairly busy lives. Well, your life is about to get a lot busier. Um, but you know, I mean, it's valuable for both of us, and I think about that also in just general work or anything like that. When, you know, if I'm reaching out to somebody to help me with a project or anything like that, I need to understand that their time is just as valuable as mine, or if not more valuable, and really focus on being thankful that other people can help me, and being thankful that I get time to spend with other people. You know, because time is valuable, and really thinking about that, that's kind of what I get out of the wasting time part, or at least this little quote here is really focusing on, like, if other people agree to be with you, then I mean, you have to be thankful of their time just as much as your time.
Absolutely, and it's a great example of it sort of realizing that in being empathetic to somebody else, that you can see more clearly the things in your own life. So if you were very cavalier about wasting somebody else's time, and then people start doing the same thing, and a good example would be somebody who says, yes, let's go play golf on Thursday, and then at the last second they just go like, oh, I'm not going to come.
Right.
That's a complete disrespect for your time, and a complete overwhelming respect for their own time, that what they want to do is far more important than the word they gave you that you would share that time.
Yeah, yeah. Making plans is kind of interesting. Like, I was just in a situation where we made plans with somebody, but it wasn't concrete. You know, it's hard to make concrete plans with parents. You know, because with our kids, if it's like 8 o'clock or something like that, the kid might be, you know, had a rough day. You know, you can't really plan for those things. So making plans for parents is tough with valuing time and wasting time, because like we just had a situation where we made plans with somebody, and we knew it was going to be kind of like sketchy. It was like basically like from the kid's point, like if the kid was able to come, then they'll be able to come. But we were sitting there, and Amber and I were starting to get anxious, because we were like, this is like 3 hours from our plan. Amber and I like to make plans and not really waste our time. We do try and use our time as pretty wisely.
Uh,
And so we're sitting there getting anxious, and then we just realized that we had to kind of take control to not be anxious or anything like that. We had to kind of take control of the situation and just be like, you know, listen, the kids are crazy today. Like let's just put this off until a day that we can plan it.
mm,
And as soon as we did that and took control of the situation, then both parties, you know, our times were understood. You know, everyone was happy at the end. Our time wasn't wasted because we took control of that situation, and we figured it out. And I mean, I think it can be hard sometimes, but really just focusing on that everyone's time is valuable was something that we thought about. And I mean, it helped us be less anxious about the situation, and we ended up having fun anyway.
well, exactly, and frankly, when you think about one of something you just brought up is a really important point, is that as parents, you do not have absolute control over your commitments to time like that. And if in the making of plans, everybody who's making the plans with you is aware of that, then that's an entirely different circumstance. Like if everybody's a parent and you kind of go like, I really want to see you guys on Thursday night, but the bottom line is you know these kids are crazy, and you know if we can do it, we're absolutely going to do it. But you know it's going to be subject to change based on what's happening. How different that is than saying to somebody, we're absolutely getting together at 8 o'clock on Thursday night.
Yeah, it's like what we talked about last week with managing expectations. Like, as long as you put the expectations up properly up front, then at the end everyone knows what's up, and it's clear for everyone.
Right, exactly, and that's respect. That's a you know that's an important thing. And frankly, you're bringing up a really good point about this valuing of time and seeing it through the eyes of others. Is that you really can't expect others to respect your time unless you respect their time. And in order to have a respect for time at all, you have to have some kind of sense of the fact that time's valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else on this valuing time,
No,
wasting time right now?
no, I think that that wraps it up for me. Okay, we'll take a quick break from our conversation. When we return, we'll discuss creating a life's purpose and the power of self-adoption. What's your next big idea?
All right. My next big idea is kind of the most important thing that I got out of this book. And so Seneca, so what I'm going to talk about right now is purpose in life and changing your purpose in life. And Seneca, he mentions purpose, but he doesn't necessarily like put a blueprint out there for us to
Uh-huh.
live a purposeful life.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple things that he says is that people tend to form their purpose in life with a distant future in mind. And so what I think that means is that, and kind of what we've talked about before, and I think this whole book is basically about your purpose in life, is that if you're just living for tomorrow and living for the future, then your purpose isn't necessarily like your purpose is not planned. And so a lot of people are just sitting there like, I'm just going to go to work and then I'm gonna retire and then that's my purpose in life.
Uh,
And I think not having a goal or anything in mind for your life and not living in the present definitely affects that. And so like he talks about like how people in their later years that are close to retirement, they're like, I've been at this job forever. When will I be free of it? When will I have my vacation?
mm-hmm.
And so if you're living this life with no purpose, and maybe his purpose was he knew his purpose maybe going into that job. Maybe the first 5 years of his life he was living a purposeful life in that job.
Uh-huh.
But then, over time, he never changed that purpose because he was just in that job, and that was his life, and that's what he thought his life was. But maybe halfway through, he stopped liking the job or stopped liking parts about it, and he never changed it. So then he gets to the end of his life, or the end of his job or anything like that, and he realizes, why am I here, and why am like I need to get a new life, but it's already slipped away.
Yeah.
And so that's just my intro here to purpose in life and changing purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any initial thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. The what you just said about the guy getting not having a real sort of sense of the arc of time through his dedication to his work like that. All you have to, it's easy to imagine because of you as a parent, it's a perfect example that while your children are dependent on you, there is a real number one purpose to working, which is the care and feeding and the sort of like enrichment of your family. And as soon as they're gone, then your whole matrix becomes very different. They become independent people who are taking care of themselves. But there you are living the exact same life you were living when your number one purpose in life was taking care of your kids, and that is and I think that's what leads to a lot of people what they classically refer to as the midlife crisis, which is that people are like, oh, my life has no meaning, and what they aren't realizing, it's not that their life didn't have any meaning, it's that their life changed meaning significantly because their children grew and left, and that they didn't really have a thought, they didn't have a conscious thought in their mind that was a thing they would have to deal with, the empty nest syndrome.
Yeah, that's funny. So one of the quotes I really like from it is the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which relies upon tomorrow and wastes today. You're arranging what lies in fortune's control and abandoning what lies in yours. What are you looking at? To what goal are you straining? The whole future lies in uncertainty. Live immediately. So
Mm-hmm.
a big thing with that is, like you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I mean, if you want to start a business, if you want to start a podcast, if you want to take your kids to the park every day, like you need to make these decisions and do it now, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, you don't know if you're going to be driving to work and you get hit by another car or anything
Yeah.
like that. And I mean, that can happen at any time. And to me, that's purpose, like creating your own purpose. Like,
Mhm.
so you need to figure out how you want to live, and you need to do it now. And that's really like an everyday thing where you need to think about what's going on and really just create that purpose on a daily basis, but
Mhm.
while also leading towards something. Like you need to have something in the future that you want to lead to, but on a daily basis you need to focus on today and just do whatever makes you happy, or not even happy, but whatever creates purpose for yourself on a daily basis.
Well, one of the things that this reminded me of was, and I think we've discussed this before, but this notion of creating long-term, lifelong goals, and that a component of that is to have a matrix of things that are important to you, that you're creating your purpose out of. Particularly even if you're talking about moment-to-moment purpose. And what I mean by that is that I really like this concept by a website called Mind Tools. And in it, what they basically say is, in order to have lifelong goals, first of all, you need to define what life is. Like, what is the whole sort of and what's the entirety of what we consider life. And for them, they carved it into a number of buckets, and in those buckets include career, financial, education, family, artistic, attitude, physical, pleasure, and public service. And what they say is that if you were to add all those together, that equals life, and that you would want in your life to have some kind of actual intention behind each of those categories. And that by having that, you would be able to make priorities in the moment of what's the most important now. Because an example being, like, your career could have a lot more meaning when you are in your 20s or in your 30s than it has when you're in your 50s. But that doesn't mean that it ever loses meaning. It just means it changes its intensity. And
That's
yes.
that sounds like a good tool to use, and to kind of build what we've talked about before, your value hierarchy, and change it on a daily basis. Like, because I think you said what's 8 buckets right now.
Yeah.
And so if there's all those different buckets that you can kind of plan your life around, or get goals around, or get present goals around, then you can figure out, which one of those are more important, and really live every day purposefully. And if it changes on a day-to-day basis, you can kind of reference that. I think that would probably be a good exercise for everyone to do.
Absolutely. And I really I don't have the URL handy, but the website is called Mind Tools, and it's if you do a Google search of setting lifelong goals, it comes up in one of the top Google search results. But one thing the one term that you're using that I think is an important one to remember in the context of something like a life's purpose is this notion that it probably isn't going to shift as rapidly as day to day. That it's probably going to be something that once you've fully engaged into what your life's purpose is, that it has a little bit of it has a duration to it, in the sense that if you really focus on, like, what is this idea of purpose, like it's very different than saying, like, interest or things I'd like to do. Like purpose is a driving force against which you are always bouncing moment to moment incoming stimulus. Like essentially your purpose in life is something that you wouldn't quickly change because of a phone call you got. That it's something that is going to remain constant until it doesn't, until your hierarchy of needs sort of shifts.
So would an example of like a purpose in life, like, so instead of me saying, uh, I want to be the best golfer in the world. Would the purpose be more of like, I want to be dedicated into fully dedicated into whatever task I'm doing at that moment, on a daily basis? Like, would that be more of an example of a purpose?
Well, I think your first example is a better example, because if you say, like, I want to be the best golfer on the planet, think of all the things that you are not going to do in order to pursue that.
Right.
That there's not going to be like, hey, there's a great show on HBO tonight, I'm going to watch that, because your purpose is being the best golfer there is. So that means there's really no air for anything else for the most part until you have reached or not reached that goal. And
Right.
so and that's really, and for you, and this is just me talking from the outside, but I think it's pretty straightforward, which is, I can't imagine there being a purpose much greater at this point than your role as a father, because of how young your children are. Whereas I'll be curious to see how that changes. I don't know. I don't have a personal experience of it, but being the parent to a toddler or to a 4-year-old, it has to be significantly different than being a parent to a 10-year-old.
Yeah, and that's something I think about all the time. I mean, even the difference between my 16-month-old compared to my 4-year-old, it changes how I act to each one of them at different times. I mean, my 4-year-old is becoming a person. Like she has her own ideas. She has her own thoughts. She comes up to me and she says, "Dad, I have an idea," and like things like that. And it's just like, it's amazing. But my purpose in life, I do feel like my purpose right now is being a father, and it does change. Like when I hang out with my little one, it's really comforting, and seeing, just trying to get him to walk more. And for her, I have to like let her be herself, and it's definitely an interesting, to change with them, and they are my purpose. And who knows when they're 18 or 20 years old, what my purpose is going to be then. I mean, it's still going to be to raise a good kid, but
Mhm.
they're going to take over their life, sooner. And yeah, it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, and I think, but that just sort of goes to that idea of, like, I don't think that the what Seneca is driving at in terms of possessing a purpose is something that requires it. What it requires is that you make some decisions about your life, and the real difference between a decision and a choice is that decisions are essentially permanent until they change. And as opposed to choices, which they change minute to minute,
Absolutely.
and that I really do think that there's a lot of value in continuing this exploration for yourself about your life's purpose. It's important for everybody, because it's the reason that you can drag yourself out of bed in the morning when you really maybe don't want to. And that's that's where we as people have to take full responsibility for our own lives. So yeah, but I do think that doing an exercise like this creation of life goals exercise, it's amazingly difficult. It's a painful sort of process when you sit down and you see those buckets and you realize that, oh wait, even though I see this family bucket, I'm not really, can I articulate what I mean by being like my family as a goal in my life? And things like your career is another example of that, because they do something in this list that I find very, very insightful, which is they separate financial from career. They see those as utterly different things. They may be related in your mind, but a lot of times people think they're the same thing, and it just isn't true. Like if you need spare cash, you can go sell your blood right now. That's different than saying, oh, I need to have, in order to make any extra money, I have to get it from my job.
Right. Right. One thing I want to nail down in this purpose in life before we move on is that so it does, I know I said it before, but it does change. Like, so if you say your purpose in life is, let's just keep on using the example, to be the best golfer in the world,
Uh-huh.
and maybe it starts making you sad or anxious or mad or something like that over time. Or I just feel like one thing I don't want to do in my life is focus on one thing, and then that ruins my life. Like, because I feel like a lot of people focus on one thing their whole life and that's their purpose, and maybe they don't succeed or anything, and they become a depressed maniac, that goes to a house in the woods,
Yeah.
in their later years. Like, so one thing that I'm going to try and focus on is, even though maybe, being a parent is my purpose in life, like, or being a good golfer, it's not that's just the example we're using
Yeah.
right now. But like, if it doesn't happen, then changing your purpose is okay, and moving to something else is okay, and that's something that I want to focus on with my life, and make sure that it doesn't, like, if I have a purpose and it doesn't work out, it doesn't destroy me.
Right. And I think that just to finish up that thought, it's important. The reason I like that golfing example is that there's a real clarity to whether or not you're achieving that or not. That, if you're like, I want to be the best golfer in the world, and you're ranked like 5,000th in the world, and then 3 years later, after dedicating your entire life and sacrificing everything, you're at 6,000, you probably should stop wanting to be a golfer.
Yeah.
And
And not have it ruin your life. Like, that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of people get into that mindset where that's everything.
But the point I'm trying to like highlight is just this idea that there has to be in your head. It can't be a generic thought, because what I mean is, you're absolutely right. Somebody could dedicate themselves to being the best golfer in the world, and then at their 45, and they've just never succeeded ever, and they've never gotten off of that. And it's sad at a certain point. So there's this fine balance that is understanding where your purpose in life, like where you intend for it to lead you, and being mindful of whether it's doing that or not, because that should be the signal for when to change and when not to change. A lot of people, I think, dabble, and that is problematic in the sense of, if the thing they're dabbling in is their life's purpose, that it's something that if it's a thing that you say to yourself, this is the thing I want to put, that I'm going to lay out as my life's purpose, then you'd better do whatever it takes to get to that life's purpose, or slide it into another bucket that says, this is a hobby. This is a thing I like to do, but it's not something I'm willing to do whatever it takes to do.
I like it. I think that's a good closing for our purpose of life.
Sweet. Okay. Well,
And you have your last point here.
Yep. I got my last wrap up, and this was something that Seneca does not make a big deal out of this, but it 100% just resonated with me for a lot of reasons, and it's the concept of self-adoption. And what he's really talking about here is that a lot of people will go through life lamenting who their parents were, or let's say that they overly find heroic their parents, which is two sides of the same coin. I had the worst parents in the world, I had the best parents in the world. But that as they go through life, their parents remain this kind of thing that they can't get away from. Like, they had awesome parents, and so now I need to be the best nuclear physicist on the planet, even though I hate physics. And that they're just going to keep driving through life because their parents were telling them to do something. Or on the other end of the spectrum, horrible parents, just the worst parents in the world, just continue to haunt people throughout their lives. And I think what Seneca is driving at is that there comes a moment in people's lives where they need to stop allowing their parents to be the figures that are giving them feminine and masculine nurturing or lack of nurture, and shift that burden to the self, where you become your own parent, and that you then sort of free your actual parents to just the role that they had, that before you adopted yourself, you had parents, and then after you adopted yourself, you are your own parent. And what I think he's driving at is this idea that if you don't have a moment where you really sit back and go like, look, I'm responsible for the feminine and the masculine energy coming into me and coming out of me, that you're always going to be in this kind of like power imbalance to the universe, that you're always a child in a universe of parent-child relationships.
I feel like that will probably be hard. That's a probably pretty hard for a lot of people to overcome because you do have, at least 18 years, right, of being with your parents and them really being the head people in your life that you learn a lot from.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't realize, well, how big the world is, like while they're growing up. And just seeing ideas from two people is hard unless the parents, allow the freedom of, finding more ideas and it's I would say that this is certainly something to learn. But at what point, like, how do you do that adoption? Like, how do you change? Like, I think they term it like generational trauma, like where over multiple generations, everyone's kind of doing the same thing because
Hmm.
that's what you know and that's what you learn from and you learn from your parents and you don't become this other person until maybe your 20s or 30s or 40s. Like it really depends.
Or never.
And or never, right.
Yeah.
So I guess you really need to be aware of this and make a change at some point in your life. So how would you even go about doing that?
Well, you bring up a really interesting point, which is, and I shouldn't say interesting, it's a reality, which is some people would be incapable of doing this. That's just a fact that for whatever reason, their psychological development was such that they just couldn't, like, they could never engage in this concept. Like, they would have to go through the process of healing themselves to the point where they could do something like that. And so it really is it's by no means something everybody can do just off the top of their heads. That it really is. I think you have to have the idea presented to you, and then you have to figure out whether it's something you can engage with or not. But it's really important that if you said to yourself, "Well, I just couldn't do that. I couldn't make that kind of break from my parents," that it gives you that it's a signal that maybe you should go through some more work on yourself, whether it be working with psychiatry or philosophy or religion or whatever it is that you do to improve your sense of self. The fact is that in more ancient human cultures, there were always rites of passage. There were always moments where the child became an adult, and that was a very specific day. It was something where on Thursday you were a child, and then on Friday you were an adult, and you had all the responsibilities of being an adult. And that as culture has proceeded, we've lost that idea completely. Whereas you genuinely can run into 50-year-old people who are as much children as they were when they were 18. And it's important to have a notion of self, because if you think that you can make life goals for yourself, or you think you can make a purpose for yourself, and you can't self parent, then there's a real problem there. Because here it's just taking full responsibility, meaning that here in the idea of self adoption, it's taking full responsibility for everything in your life moving forward. From the minute that you make that decision to go forward, you can no longer blame your parents. You can no longer, or you can no longer heroically lift up your parents. That from that point forward, all the responsibility for your day to day falls on you, because you are now your own parent.
Yeah, I feel like that. I guess that hits everyone. I feel like my parents, they gave me money like right when I moved out, like when I was 19 years old,
Uh-huh.
and then like after 1 month they didn't. And I feel like that's like within that like month period is when I realized like, I guess I need to really take care of everything myself. Like this is my life and I have to do it. And I remember being super broke when I was 19 and having like a job that didn't pay very much, but
Mm-hmm.
I was it was my life at that point. Like my parents cut me off and they
Mm-hmm.
were like, and it was mine. And so I feel like that was like kind of a turning point for me.
Mm-hmm.
But then also really becoming a parent and realizing things that I still think about that I learned from my parents when I was young. Not that they were right or wrong. It's just a lot of things are from different times that and they you have to change those over times. But
Uh-huh.
I feel like becoming a parent and raising my kid has made me think about this a lot more. Like how was I raised, and what have I changed about myself that I can kind of instill in a 4-year-old, that by the time they're 20, that they might have already started thinking about this, and thinking and knowing that I'm not always 100% right, and like my wife is not always 100% right, and you can have your own thoughts and ideas, and figure out your own life. And I think I've really started to think about that even more, like having kids, than when I was 19 or 20, and changing that in myself.
And this can also give you another framework to help them with, because at a certain point, like you have to remain, like, as long as your kids are still in your house, that relationship remains. Your children aren't your peer. It's your house, and your you and Amber's house. And the children need to sort of like realize that they are not equal partners, that they are in fact like essentially employees in this relationship until such time as they go out and do it themselves. But you can encourage that notion that they're going to come a time when they should perform this kind of concept of self-adoption. Because again, I don't think it's something that you can just like give it to a person and they just remember it. It's kind of like, remember when you had mentioned to me that I had given you some like books like on the Shortness of Life or something, and then you sort of stuck them in a drawer for a number of years, and then they finally came back out again. It's a similar idea, which is you can plant the idea, but you can't, it's not necessarily going to take hold until the person wants to do it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. To be specific on those books, that I actually remember what they were. It's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and then Think and Grow Rich. Like those are the two books that I left in a drawer and let sit for a few years. But those are two awesome books to kind of give a good framework, if you're starting out learning and self-improvement.
Absolutely. I love those things to death. But just to wrap up this idea, it's really just something that I have, from the moment I read that in his text, it began to generate so much thought in me, in the sense of like, well, where does the line of parenting end? And I've often thought about like the freedom. I don't think my parents truly felt like they could let go of the parent-child relationship until I was like 37. Like I'd finally sort of become enough rational enough in their headspace that even though they never stopped worrying about their children, it became more like a game for them to worry about their children than an active worry for them. And it's something that, and that realization that you never become, your parents are always your parent. There's always a parent-child relationship. They are always the person who created you, but that doesn't mean that you can't become their peer. And the way that you become their peer later on, and it's a paradox, there's no question about it, because you always have to honor that parent-child relationship. But there is a reality when they don't have a legitimate reason to be worried about you the way a parent would worry about their child. And that's when you have taken on and shown the capacity to be just as responsible as they ever were.
Yep. I'll definitely be just as responsible, but I'll definitely always go to my mom for some good food.
Damn straight, brother. So
All right.
I'm not even her child.
That sounds good. All right, Uncle Greg. Well, let's take a break, and when we're back, I'll discuss my dad corner for the week, and then I guess you'll give us your thought of the week.
Sounds good. We'll talk to you in a minute. And we're back. Josh, what's up in your dad corner this week?
Oh man. So the past 2 weeks since our last discussion, my kids' preschool closed due to COVID. And so they had to close for 14 days. And so I have been with my kids for the past 2 weeks, which was not a bad thing. So that's one thing. That's what all this is about right now. So first of all, 2 weeks to the kids. There's multiple mindsets you can have for this when you get into it. You can be like, oh, I'm screwed. Like I have to deal with these kids for 2 weeks. The wife is working 50 hours this week, It's all myself. So that could be one mindset.
Hmm.
Mindset number two could be like, I get 2 weeks to hang out with my two little kids and have fun and do whatever we want and just enjoy the time. Now, when this happened, it was the first reaction for all of us parents, because I have a few sets of parents in the neighborhood
Yeah.
who go to this school.
Mhm.
Everyone was like, "Ah, this is terrible. This is the worst thing." And man, I on Monday, I just changed my mindset. I was like, I can't think negatively. I was like, this is going to be an awesome 2 weeks. Like I'm just going to enjoy it and have fun. And so that's my first observation of the week was just for me, was to make sure that my mindset going into these 2 weeks, that it was going to be a fun time and there's nothing negative about it. And I mean, who gets tired? Tired is just a feeling, and I'll push through it. And so that was my first observation.
Uh-huh.
Now the second observation was actually hanging out with the kids. So there's a couple ways to go about this. Like I could have structured everything with my kids and constantly telling them what to do, but I made the choice to allow my 4-year-old to kind of control the week, not like on a date, not every single thing, but kind
Mhm.
of let her do her thing.
Okay.
And so every day I was like, what would you like to do? Like, what would you like to eat? And it was awesome because when I gave her the choice, I mean, we did flashcards, we did sight words, so we did a bunch of education stuff. I was like, well, hey, daddy is into fitness, and I have this book. And she opened the book and she saw bones. And
Ah,
like, and then she was like, oh, let me learn about this, dad. And so I would pull up like a YouTube video on anatomy, and we would go through and watch all the bones. But I wasn't forcing any of this on her.
mhm.
I was just asking her and allowing her to do whatever she would like, and that's what she was liking. um Also, to that point, we did go to the park every single day,
Uh-huh.
because she wanted to do that. And then and so what I saw from doing from kind of allowing her to make choices, and honestly just trusting her,
Uh,
was that she made the right decisions. And of course sometimes she wanted to sit there and just watch PJ Masks or one of her shows or anything like that. But allowing her to choose, she didn't have very many meltdowns or anything like that. She
ah,
she was enjoying her day. And I saw a different part of her than I've ever seen, and it was awesome. And so I just, not micromanaging her and just allowing her to choose and trusting her, was just something that I did. And that was kind of the observation that I had this week.
yeah. And so being able to, it sounds like just allowing her natural curiosity to drive your exploration. She was she was she's clearly curious about a lot of things. And so she was able to, continuously give you something to do next.
Yeah, and so if she was curious about it, then she liked it. Like I didn't make her do anything. And so when she wanted to look at anatomy, then she wanted to look at, like, she would actually sit there and look at it. Where in times in the past where I've tried to teach her something, like, let's for example, there was a bee out front, and I was like, what kind of bee is that? And so we pulled up like a YouTube thing that showed 8 different types of bees. And by the time I pulled it up, she was already out looking at something else, so she wasn't interested. But giving her the choice and allowing her to do that, it really kept her interest, and it made me think about school and how she's going to learn. Like, because I know that type of learning is common, and I believe it's called Montessori schools,
Yes, yes.
um, compared to, like, she's probably going to go to public school, just because Montessori schools are fairly expensive and
Yeah,
public
yeah.
school is free. But I still think that any type of learning that I give her at home, I'm going to really just try and focus on what she likes and not try and force anything to her. And then when she's at school, like actual school, kindergarten or first grade or anything like that, she's just going to have to learn the basics. And I'm interested in to see, how she learns and what's the best way she learns once she's in a forced situation like school.
Okay. No,
Yep.
that sounds great. Sounds like a good productive week, and that's a really great insight to have because, let's face it, like that is as applicable to you and I as adults as it is to her as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And how often were you forced in elementary school or middle school or high school to read chapters of things that you don't care about and take tests on that? And then right now, I don't remember anything from there, but I remember a lot that has to do with building businesses or a lot of math and things like that I actually use on a daily basis. So and now, I didn't learn anything about philosophy in school or anything like that. And so this is like philosophy piques my interest so much. And I see the value in it on a day-to-day basis. And it definitely relates to me just as much as my kids, I guess.
Sweet. Okay.
All right,
Well,
Uncle Greg, what is your thought of the week to kind of end us here?
well, to bring us home this week, I was thinking about this a quote that I had heard many years ago, and it always struck me, and it's by William James, and it's essentially this: a great many people think they are thinking when they are merely rearranging their prejudices. And that got me thinking about the definition of the word prejudice, which is essentially a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. And it's something that I really would like everyone to be thinking about for themselves always, which is we're good at reacting. We aren't very good at thinking. And part of reacting is creating a bunch of little preconceived ideas that we just execute like an executable file in a computer. Driving is a good example. Think about how much emphasis and energy you put into learning driving, and then later on how little thought is placed in it at all. It's just a behavior. And the same goes for most people when they're talking about what they will use the word this is what I think. And you realize fairly quickly that it isn't what they think. It's just an idea that was either placed inside of them that they're regurgitating, or it's some kind of variation on that theme. Because when you really start to talk to them about the idea, it falls apart because they never really thought about it. They just heard it and said, hey, I agree with that, so I'm going to repeat that as my thinking from now on.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple thoughts on this actually. So I've thought about this a lot in my mindfulness practices and thinking through different lenses. And so one thing, the way I visualize this is that from my parents and from schooling and from social media or anything like that, like I have 50 different lenses on each subject, and so I need to figure out what lens I'm looking through to figure that out. And so an example that so one thing that I always see is that people focus on instant reactions. Like if I'm not answering somebody's question in half a second, then I'm wrong. But what I'm doing now is I'm sitting there for a couple seconds when someone asks me something and thinking like how many lenses, like what have I learned in the past that is already a preconceived notion about this subject, and like what are the facts, and like think logically about it in the moment instead of just instantly going back to something I've already done, even though you can go back to something you've already done to figure things out. But
Mm-hmm.
like just really thinking of it from a clean lens or a clean slate instead of all my preconceived notions or prejudices.
Mm-hmm. And it is very different because I think we live in the golden age of not thinking, and it's best exemplified by social media, and that how rapidly people can quickly throw out reactions to what somebody just said, and that it's just a stream of prejudices just being laid out, and it's abundantly clear that nobody really is thinking. They're trying to protect their team. They have a cherished idea that they don't want anyone to ever question. There's all of this it's instinctual reaction but people try to act like it's thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. And this is just another great thought of the week for me to think about over the next couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, I guess we haven't actually picked a topic for our next podcast, so it can be a big mystery that we will discover over the next couple of weeks. And I look forward to talking to you then, and hope you have a great week coming up.
All right, Uncle Greg, it was good talking to you, and have a good one. Stay curious.
Take care, pal. Bye-bye. Hey folks, Uncle Greg here. Just wanted to thank you for listening and ask you to join us next time. And a special thanks to Ted Onulak and Exit 10 for our music. You can check them out at exit10band.com. That's EXIT10band.com.